Hello, Ahta, and hello, listeners, and I hope everyone's having a great day. Today, we're going to dive into inflammation. So, there's a lot of information about inflammation, and I think we should start with the zoomed out picture of what is it? Is it good or bad, and how does it show up in the body?
Great. Yeah. Great to see you, Josh. And thanks for having me. And hello to everybody and welcome. And wow, what a great topic, because everybody is got some issues with inflammation. And hopefully we can create some really clear information that leads to some inspiration about what you can do to upgrade your health and wellness and vibrancy around the inflammation topic. Because it's really embedded in so many functions of our life. And if we've got excess, systemic inflammation running in us, we just can't really be at our optimal. So I'm really excited about this. I've been dancing in and out of like an optimal state and a very suboptimal state for years, even to the point of about, I think 6, 7 years ago, it was so stressful at work that I actually was my blood work showed that I had early signs of developing Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. Even though I was running this superfood company and had this great diet, my stress level was so high that it was creating, overload in my immune system. So I'm
All right.
excited.
So if we go back in time and we zoom into what is happening in the body with inflammation. First off, is inflammation good? Is it bad? Is it?
It's both. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Great question. It's both. So if it's okay to zoom out and get a little geeky on some human physiology, that it's just so important for us to at least know the basics, and that is that inflammation is a function of our immune system, and it's mostly a good function. It's evolved for, hundreds of thousands of years to help us heal, right? So we have two aspects of our immune system, the innate system and the adaptive. Let's hit the innate system first because it's simpler. The innate system is what kicks in immediately if we cut a finger, right? It's going to enhance the healing mechanism by increasing blood flow, etc. And we won't get into all of what happens, but that innate system kicks in immediately to create enhanced, let's just say, energies there, right? So that the healing of that cut can begin and happen as quickly as possible. Okay, so now over here on the other aspect of our immune system is this adaptive system. The adaptive system is the one that kicks in if we are exposed to a pathogen, whether that's, a virus or, a bacteria or a food-borne toxin, an airborne toxin, something, allergies, all the, the pollens that can create some reactions. All of that is where mostly the adaptive system is kicking in, and it's saying, okay, do we know about this invader? Has this come before so that we know how to marshal our troops? Or is this a new one? So the adaptive system is more complicated. It has a memory. It's really involved. However, and it's such a great friend for us, and we want some of the inflammation that it creates to enhance, healing mechanisms. However, it's the one that gets swamped by too many negative factors, right? So when that exposure to, let's say, a virus hits us, it isn't happening out of the blue, right? We got to look at the context. That an adaptive system is already dealing with some stress and maybe some foods that we're eating that we have sensitivities to that aren't optimal, some general like background pollutants that are just in everything in our life, right? Or lack of sleep or lack of movement, just, all the lifestyle things that are taxing that adaptive system. So when that virus arrives, that adaptive system is already working so hard that virus might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak. Is
So
that
there's a
kind of
variety of those what would you call those, the stimulations from a variety of different angles that can boost the adaptive system into being overly active.
right?
And is this where the chronic inflammation would come
This
into
is
play?
entirely, it only is coming from this adaptive system, this chronic excess inflammation. So acute inflammation is good. That's where it's just a short-term thing. I'm going to heal this cut or this bruise, right? The
Mhm.
adaptive system is the one that gets swamped and starts to create over, like an overreaction, so to speak. And as we talked about before that we started recording, it's the one that is responsible for all the types of autoimmune
Mhm.
disorders where the adaptive system gets so overwhelmed that it's confused and it mistakes a, a good thing for an invader, like a body part, like a thyroid. It starts to get mixed up with some of the thyroid hormones, look a little bit like other proteins that we might be eating. It's one of the
Mhm.
reasons gluten is a problem for so many people, is the gluten proteins actually molecularly are somewhat similar to some of the thyroid hormones, and the thyroid can go, wait, what's going on? Like, I can't
Mhm.
sort all this out, right? And that's just on top of other things we just talked about, like pollutants or, junk oils or too many refined carbs. There's so many things that create what I'll call a stack effect that start to swamp our immune system. Think of it like your bank account, right? If you're making too many withdrawals,
Mhm.
and not enough deposits, what happens? You're in trouble,
Mhm.
right? You're overdrawn. Our immune system is a little bit like that. We're making so many withdrawals with our quote modern lifestyle, that adaptive system is like just overdrawn, and it just doesn't have the capacity to deal with a random virus that might come through.
So today it would maybe it would be fair to say that we're in a crisis of the adaptive immune system, and it's the driving factor behind chronic inflammation, and the
Yes,
driving factor behind that driving factor is these aspects of our life, our sleep habits, our the way we're thinking, the types of diet that we're eating, the amount of exercise we're getting. These factors are playing into creating systemic responses in our immune system, which
correct.
are creating systemic inflammation.
Yeah, exactly. Great summary. Thanks for listening to that. Yeah, so I would like if I'd love to hear like if you have kind of a top, five or half dozen like things that, are the causes of systemic inflammation for you that you're kind of managing and working with to, because I'll just rattle off mine real quick. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, and this isn't necessarily anybody else's order, and this isn't exactly my priority order, but it's pretty close, would be, food in general. Like, so food sensitivities. I'm not fully allergic to any foods, but I'm mildly allergic or highly sensitive to a couple of foods. Um,
Mm-hmm.
some of them are like really healthy things. Like I'm a little bit sensitive to garlic, right? So even though
Mm-hmm.
it's not even remotely an allergy, it is a bit of a food sensitivity that I avoid. So, definitely gluten. I'm really disciplined about being roughly 99% gluten free, partly because of what I mentioned earlier. Gluten can just kind of swamp our adaptive system a bit, depending on the individual, not everyone. And it can make it harder for the thyroid to really work optimally. And it's such an important part of our endocrine system. The thyroid is a master gland. So anyway, food sensitivities, is number one. Number two, I would say just pollutants and toxins, whether it's cosmetics, whether it's airborne, whether it's, good airborne nature-based things like pollens are actually kind of good for us to be exposed to, except for people whose adaptive system is so swamped it just can't even deal with pollens. Pollens are just a normal part of nature, right? So I would say
Mm-hmm.
we have an undeclared epidemic of swamped adaptive systems because look at how many people are just walloped by allergies. And I used to before I took good care of my immune system, but maybe we'll go back to that. So food sensitivities, then toxins, pollutants, then I would say general overstimulation, too much buzz, too busy, overscheduled. Um, and then next, I would maybe just say media exposure. This might sound fanatical to some people, but like I've completely unplugged from Facebook, Instagram, things like that. And I'm like, I'll just read occasional long form pieces on something like Substack that's kind of calm and isn't so designed to just trigger our dopamine cycles. Then I would say movement, lack of movement and lack of rest, which kind of go a little into the overstimulation one. There's some overlap there. And then lastly, just general state of my consciousness. Like, am I in worry, doubt, and fear? Is it subtle? Am I just slightly worried about something in the future or regretting something in the past? Am I doubting myself? Am I doubting, something in my work, in my relation? Like all those, and then just general fears. Because the key to optimal health, whether we're talking microbiome, whether we're talking, inflammation, whether we're talking just general immunity and alertness and strength and vitality, all that is the state of our autonomic nervous system filters into everything. So what we're talking about here, like we can't underestimate the tone and tenor of our autonomic nervous system in this. So yeah, we're going to talk about really tangible things like food and pollutants, but if we don't talk about the so-called intangibles that are affecting our autonomic nervous system tone, we're really missing a huge, huge component.
And do you think your autonomic, if you had to list in priority of the five, is it up there with diet and tied, or is it first place of the factors that
Oh, that's
bring
a good.
inflammation to you? Or
You always ask the best questions. You're great. Yeah, it is. It is, in a way, it is number one, but I think because I have such a strong science background and I almost to the point of, I'll use a strange word, but being a little addicted to empirical science and rational, like concise, provable things and the
measurable?
huh?
Yeah,
What?
measurable.
Yeah, measurable. Thank you. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
the autonomic nervous system and the intangibles are, you can't get, quite the same level of handle on those. And yet, um, it's one of the reasons why when I had terrible systemic inflammation when I was age 19 in college and then on into 20, and they just kept giving me stronger cortisone creams to wipe on my arms. And I had to start wearing long sleeve shirts because I was, so embarrassed that I had this big rashy thing all over my right arm. And it wasn't until I moved to a yoga retreat for an internship at age 20 and was meditating 3 times a day that the first true miracle of my life occurred. Whereas this eczema that I had no help from doctors with for a year and a half and was really suffering vanished in 3 weeks. So
What do
that,
you think was happening in your immune system? Like, what aspect of the actual sitting in meditation was what was going on in your body and your immune system then?
well, it completely eliminated the kind of what I'll call FUD, that acronym for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So it
Mm,
completely eliminated the FUD in my life, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's like, wow, wow, I wasn't doubting, like how I eat, how I live, how I think, I was breathe, and I was in that state of calmness that enabled me to have a balance with my sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system that is the two components of the autonomic nervous system. So it's pretty clear. And since then, this was a long time ago. This was 40 years ago that this happened. Um, but it set the tone for me to uh, really understand that the intangibles and the nervous system and just the peace of mind, peace of heart, having an alignment of body, mind, and soul. But when we're like our heart and soul is feeling like this way, but the world is telling us, go get this job to make this money, even though you hate it.
mm,
If we have that level of disconnect, which is primarily what I had, I didn't belong in college in that particular way, and I was out of alignments. So
Hmm.
yeah, so
And
that
it
was,
showed up in the body.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
it
showing up in
created
the
inflammation.
body. And for me, the canary in the coal mine was this outrageous, itchy, skin condition, because the skin is one of the places where we get these symptoms of excess inflammation. The other is the joints. The other can be in the eyes, twitchy eyes, or, eye,
Blurry. Yeah.
or blurry, like, and in the mind, kind of, you know,
Hmm.
yeah, there's so many things that I don't want to make this too long. You guide us into what you want to do next, please, because I'll go on and on
Yeah.
and on that one.
Well, there was a tonifying of the nervous system, and if I'm remembering correctly, you also had some diet awareness that was coming in while you were um, shifting into the monkhood stage of your life. So you
Yeah.
were in these seated places, meditating regularly, but also maybe looking at food and whole foods a little bit more. And so, within 3 weeks, you saw a turnaround of a serious autoimmune
Oh
condition.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, definitely. I had already like cleaned up my diet to a great extent, but I was still drinking, probably too much beer and eating, like foods that I was somewhat I just had a sensitive system, from,
Hmm.
back earlier in my teens with some issues, but I won't go into all that. But yeah, so I think, living at that retreat and eating better, and meditating. Let me just, yeah, say that it was definitely both diet and meditation and yoga. We did yoga twice a day, meditated 3 times a day. So, and being of service, like the work that I was doing there felt meaningful. Like it was really, really just a big paradigm shift from, to get out of college and go do that. It was a blessing. So yeah, that was my
Hmm.
first lesson in excess, chronic, systemic
Yeah.
inflammation.
Hmm. Well, I have some similarities there. I would say, in regards to the driving factors behind growing inflammation, chronic inflammation in my body, one is denial, is just me sitting in stages of growing. The pain is kicking in, the brain fog, things like that, but I ignore it for an extended period of time. Um, Two, I'm quite kapha in my metabolization. So my speed in the way that I detox, the way I metabolize food, nutrients, emotions, these things happen slowly. And because of the pace of the way that I metabolize and detox, if I overload by overeating, overstimulating, overthinking, over worrying, I liked the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, like those aspects emotionally, they can create some clenching in my system,
Mm-hmm.
both literally in my tissues and then emotionally, etc. And all of these things will clench and slow down an already slow system. And then I'll turn into my more inflammatory habits of, hey, I'm going to eat a bunch of carbs because I'm feeling low energy or I'm feeling sad. Or so essentially, I have these stacking situations where, um, relatively, if I'm in a place of allowing my metabolization to happen in the speed it needs to, this doesn't happen. But if things get stacked up, that's tends to be the most driving factor of what brings inflammation into my system. And the
Yeah.
way that shows up for me is brain fog, being tongue tied, and pain,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in my joints
Mm-hmm.
or in my thyroid or in my descending digestive tract. There's certain, like, I'll call them hot spots that will show up, and they
Mm.
they may be subtle for a while, but if I'm really in denial about them and not paying attention and not keeping myself on track with the habits that I know help keep my chronic inflammation down, they'll show back up again. So I don't know. After so many decades of being in this dance with inflammation, do you have some kind of relapsing symptoms that you deal with? And if so, what have you learned about those symptoms as being the best way for you to eliminate or at least turn the volume down on your inflammation?
Okay, excellent. So, a couple of the current things, I haven't dealt with an eczema thing now for 40 years. Um, and I know both of us years ago, before we had really cleaned up our lifestyle a lot. We dealt with allergies during allergy seasons that were really debilitating. I got to the point, thankfully this was a long time ago, over a decade ago, but where I couldn't mow the grass. My immune system was swamped enough that just mowing the grass would trigger a bunch of allergic, reaction and be really debilitating. So, so that's definitely, was one where it was just like, oh, couldn't function. But for me now, my current hot spots, as you called it, the canary in the coal mines, the telltale signs for me would be um, urination function, like both during the day and at night. Excuse me. So if I get up just once a night to pee, um, and it feels fairly clear and normal, then I know that the prior days um, so-called factors of lifestyle factors stacked up in a good way, that I had very little inflammation to process during the night. But if I get up to pee more than once, um, and it's a little bit has that stress pee, and at times back before you rescued me and lowered my stress level so much here at Sarvaa Organics, um, I found myself like having the urge to pee, like at my desk when my bladder is probably only half full. Like I would go to the restroom and realize, well, that wasn't a big full pee. That was like a stress pee. So that's one place that I think people can really start to get more intimate with themselves and just see like how is their urination? How often is it? Is it a triggered by just a healthy full bladder, or more that kidney meridian, to use Chinese medicine languaging, being like out of balance and not in
Mm-hmm.
equilibrium. And then the other
That's a good point.
yeah, and then the other big one, if I can just jump right into it, and then maybe we go back and dive into more detail if you want, would be
Yeah.
joint issues. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
I have some old injuries that get re-triggered by excess systemic inflammation. Um, whether it's stress level, or like you said, that great example of excess carbs. Like I don't eat a lot of refined
Mm-hmm.
carbs and sugars normally.
Mm-hmm.
I never eat any sweetened drinks really, which are a big inflammatory factor. I avoid all the junk oils. However, like what you just said, there's like if there's things that I'm like a lot of little things that aren't quite optimal, I'll just feel like, man, my psoas muscle on my right side, my sacroiliac and L5 lumbar, bottom lumbar, that little collection of people, so to speak, will be talking to me, and they'll be giving me plenty of information that
Mm-hmm.
I could be wise to make a shift, because it's pain is what's showing up, and stiffness combined. So those are the
Mm-hmm.
biggies for me. And yeah, and I guess, and just quality of sleep. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
do I wake up at midnight to pee and feeling a little bit jangly, or have I made it all the way till 4 a.m.? I happen to be someone who gets up somewhere between 4 and 5 every day. So that's, I really do watch that to go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
yesterday I let myself get a little too buzzed, a little too overstimulated, because I have this excitement for life and this joy and this embrace, but I can go too far with that. Like you mentioned the Ayurvedic constitution that primarily goes out of balance for you is the kapha element. Well, for me, my elements that go out of balance are the vata and the pitta. The air and the fire elements are what tend to get over amped. It's both my strength and my weakness. So I have to watch like getting
Mm-hmm.
overexcited, overstimulated, overdoing, whether it's with dance, whether it's exercise, etc. So those are my biggies.
Yeah. So, well, I'm glad that you brought up the idea that there are some regular parts of our day that we experience every single day, every single night of our lives, and we can use those as ways to get a pulse on where inflammation's showing up in our body, chronic inflammation, that is. And, you know, inflammation doesn't always show up as pain. If we're peeing many, many times within the night, um, if we are tongue-tied, if we have brain fog, these other aspects that show up in our day-to-day can speak to an underlying level of growing inflammation. And what tends to be behind this chronic experience, beyond just our lifestyle experiences, is something called leaky gut and gut permeability. And as the cells in our gut start to split, it will let undigested food and other things, other materials, chemicals, etc., into the bloodstream, and it activates our immune system. And the adaptive system, as we talked about before, will get trained to attack nutrients itself and then attack tissues itself, and it just kind of gets turned on to attack the system, and this can be a driving factor behind the chronic inflammation.
Great point.
So I think
yeah, can I
let's
make a
see.
comment on that one right there?
Yeah, please do.
That one's such a biggie, because if we have inflammation that is beginning at such a core place in our bodily systems, right? Our small intestine and large intestine, it's it's so underestimated. And in the prior recording that we did about the microbiome, we talked about the leaky gut syndrome. Also, the technical term is gut permeability, and there's two kinds of gut permeability: intracellular and extracellular. Some people have one, some people have the other, some have both. And if you've got both of those kinds of gut permeability, then you've got, at a fundamental layer, your immune system, adaptive system, is constantly dealing with too much input of invaders, because we're not supposed to have undigested food particles getting into our bloodstream. The way our gut works is to allow only the nutrients that the body wants to pass into the bloodstream and be circulated around for all the cells to collect nutrients from. It's almost like the tubes, so to speak. Our arteries are like a moving smorgasbord of nutrients, and our cells, as that blood's going by, go, oh, I'll take some of that vitamin C. Oh, I'll take some of that calcium. Oh, I'll take some of that magnesium, right? And
Mhm.
and that's it. There's not supposed to be any like big molecules of food that aren't broken down into the component nutrients in our bloodstream. If there are, we're dealing with deep, deep and inflammation that is just going to swamp our adaptive system. So glad you brought that up.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, what other ways does the adaptive system show up? We'll have our
Oh
immune
yeah.
system responding to. Yeah, go ahead.
You and I talked once not too long ago. You mentioned one of your telltale signs is sneeze. Like if
Mhm.
there's something that your body doesn't like in the food realm. I forget the example you used a couple weeks ago. Do you remember what it was?
Well, there's a few things, but basically, if I start to get a little bit of a runny nose or I start to sneeze at all, that tends to be a very immediate sign that something in the last hour
Yeah.
that I've done or ingested is causing a boost of inflammation in my system. So that could be food, that could be stress, that could be carbohydrates too early in the day for me. That could be not fasting long enough, a variety of things. But it also can be just, I've noticed it is a marker of when general inflammation is too high in general. For example, when we're driving through the desert, me and my brother, we're very closely genetically related. We're driving through the desert and it's very hot. We're getting roasted in northern Arizona, and all of a sudden we'll start sneezing while we're driving. We're stimulated by driving fast. We're stimulated by the heat in the air that's starting to lift our system. And I find if I've had food that day, that's any slight level of inflammatory for me, I will start to sneeze and I'll get a runny nose. So it's just kind of interesting to get a pulse on those types of factors. as
That's
well, because it's not pain, it's just a subtle sneeze.
right. And sneeze is a mechanism of our autonomic nervous system, right? And we also know
Mhm.
how good it can feel to sneeze. It's kind of like an energy release, but yeah, it is another piece of information. So, all these things are information points for us: stiffness, pain, sneezes, like twitchy eyes, all the different things we've talked about. And back to what you said, the heat inflammation. Again, there's a stack effect. If we're doing most of the other things well in our life, we'll have more resiliency to interact with some excess, temperature around us, right? But if there's a few other things that were already not very optimal, then that other thing is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, whether it's heat or whether it's a sugary drink can make people sneeze. And it's can be a sign of a mild allergic reaction to something, right? Just like when people are sneezing a lot around airborne things, that's the body's way to say, hey, too much of that, right? Too much exposure to that. So thanks for, yeah,
Or
that's,
just too much in general. Yeah, it can, because we can focus in on a single straw that's breaking the back, but as you said, it can be a variety of factors, and all of them are just hinting that overall systemic inflammation is a little high.
oh, yeah, right. And so, let's talk about topicals real quick because living around here in Hawaii, we, you know, we see a lot of people, show up at some of the beaches and some of these little rocky coves, spraying on pretty toxic sunscreen. And occasionally I'll see them sneeze while they do it. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
I bet that's not real optimal for their body. I certainly wouldn't want to use many of those spray sunscreens, for instance, right? Well, just another example, Bronwyn had eye sensitivity. She tried, she doesn't wear a lot of makeup, but she does wear a little bit from time to time. And she bought some good, supposedly, non-toxic, eye makeup of some kind at a health food store. And after a week of using it, she got a rashy thing on her, like her eyelids, and, itchy, redness. So redness is another thing that we'll have, whether it's, the redness on the skin, if we're itching, or if bug bites, if bug bites drive us crazy for, a couple of days, and in a really clean system, like sometimes a mosquito will bite, I'll only feel it for 5 or 10 minutes, right? Now, the
Mm-hmm.
fire ant bites here, I will feel longer than that. Sometimes
Fair.
they'll come back the next day. But here's a great little factoid, just to use an example about how brilliant the body is. We recently discovered from a friend who is a Chinese medicine doctor that if you get a fire ant bite, and in the first hour you can put your own urine on it, the all the components that are in our own urine will greatly diminish the symptoms of a fire ant bite. It sort of grosses people out to mention it, but let's face it, urine is actually sterile unless you have a bladder infection. It might gross people out, but it isn't the same as going number two, which is not sterile at all. Uh, but but
I don't
number
rub that on.
number one, it's a funny thing. So, fun little factoid for any of you who might find that helpful for other things like a spider bite. Even I've heard, but I haven't tried it. We've only been using it with fire ant bites. So redness, itchiness, that inflammation um, can be a combination of the innate immune system, good reaction, and maybe the adaptive system overreacting, going, I remember that last fire bite. That was terrible. I'm going to overdo it a little bit here. So watch.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Can have an innate, you can be having an innate response, but if you have a chronic adaptive situation underneath an innate inflammatory response, it can prolong that experience,
right.
and you can have a bug bite or whatever last as a terrible itch for a long time. While if you have a system that isn't full of chronic inflammation, the bug bite will pass on without you even noticing.
Right. Those are very similar. That example is very similar to the airborne allergies. Like I
Mm-hmm.
notice sometimes that I might get, one sneeze and a 5-minute reaction to an airborne thing. Like if I'm shaking, oops, if I'm shaking a rug, right? Out off the deck, and I'll breathe a really concentrated dose of dust and dander and whatever it is. I might get one sneeze and a little bit of a, watery eye for, a half a minute to 2 minutes, right? So that tells me,
Mm-hmm.
oh, my system's pretty good, like pretty resilient. Whereas, and I never have any issues with, I mean, it's allergy season all year long here. There's always something blooming here in the tropics. And by optimizing, my microbiome and all these other factors that, keep us from developing excess systemic inflammation, I just don't get any, allergy symptoms at all. And so I'm really grateful for that. Don't mean to sound like bragging. I just want to give people inspiration of what's possible if we remove a number of the aggravants to our autonomic nervous system and our immune system. So,
Well, I think that's a good way to segue into what are some of the solutions? What do we do in our day to day to help lower our adaptive response that's causing chronic inflammation?
yeah.
What's your daily routine to lower chronic inflammation like?
Okay, so there's sort of like the longer arc, so to speak, of the weekly cycle, the monthly, like generally plenty of good sleep and rest, right, so that the autonomic nervous system can reset. Um, the other is throughout the day, if things are busy, like I have a lot going on, right, with work and other parts of my life, from doing the dishes and taking out the trash, etc. So if I get too buzzed and I'm multitasking too much and I'm finding myself like not breathing well, like I'm shallow and I'm rushing, whether it's dishes or work, what doesn't matter. Like it's that, okay, remember to slow down my breath. So long, slow breathing, like get to the core of what might be off in my autonomic nervous system, right? Certainly, again, on the long arc, diet, keeping my diet really clean, doing like sometimes dietary disciplines sound like a bummer to people, but here's a reframe. Switch it from discipline and denial to blissipline. Like you're not like when people say, "Oh, I don't want to give up bread." That's just I love it, but to me, it's like, "Oh, trading the paltry pleasure of a little bit of like uh, bread for a few minutes that is going to create hours and hours, if not days, of downside. It's a really bad trade-off, right? It's a terrible investment. So for me, just generally really clean diet and just gradually eliminating as many aggravants. So obviously all the junk oils, all sugars, especially sugars embedded in liquid that hit our system so fast. A little bit of sugars embedded in a meal that has proteins, fats, fiber. Uh, did I say protein, fats, fiber, and
Mm-hmm.
slow burn carbs and just good nutrients, micronutrients, not just macronutrients. Then a little bit of sugars embedded in that, but no sugary drinks. And I don't mean radically sugar. I mean even mildly sugary drinks. Nothing with more than 6 grams per, like a 8-ounce serving or 12-ounce serving
Mm-hmm.
of anything liquid. Get really blissipined on, the
Yeah.
refined carbs thing. Then the other thing for solutions is healthy movement, throughout the day, not just one big burst of exercise, but maybe for my constitution, a number of breaks during work, like go outside for 5 minutes, take a breath, take a short 5-minute walk, 8-minute walk, preferably 10 or 12, whatever, 20 minutes when I have time. And then I would say, yeah, definitely avoiding the toxins, whether it's topical, whether it's food based, whether it's, um, just, yeah, too much plastic exposure, all of that. Just a very holistic approach to both physical, tangible things, um, like dietary, factors, and then, holistic approach to the intangibles of our autonomic nervous system and our peacefulness and our centeredness and how present we are. So those, oh, and the water element, showers, baths, hot tubs, lakes, rivers, oceans, swimming pools. Uh, if all someone has is a kiddie swimming pool in their yard to get in, great. What it, or if you end up taking one bath and two showers a day, especially for my constitution that I mentioned, I go out of balance with the air and the fire element, the vata pitta elements. So water is huge. Any aspect of water, preferably swimming for me, because it's a combination of healthy movement and immersion in some kind of water. So give yourself permission to, utilize that water element to be grounding. Oh, grounding in any way, walking, uh, looking at nature visually, yeah, and breathing. So though that's a lot. And oh, and then maybe we get into this later, but um, one of the really potent anti-inflammatory things that you and I do is uh, green drinks of various kind, lots of greens,
Mm-hmm.
is both really important for these immune system factors, but also our microbiome, and they're just so interrelated. So yeah, I know that
Well,
might have been a lot of blitz, but I
no,
just want
that's fine. That's great. I really appreciate this idea of Blissipline, and one, it's clever, and I love that. But two, it's a good reminder to make your discipline something that builds your bliss.
yeah.
Make that the focus of it. And I'm curious in regards to inflammation in particular. You do a variety of green drinks and morning beverages and things like
Hmm.
that. And
Right.
maybe you can tell us a little bit about your lemon water shot, your
Okay.
shot as you call it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then also your green drink versus your green smoothie.
Okay, yeah. So every morning is, a couple of Sarvaa Organics, our products. Um, Not to do a shameless plug, but this is just the reality that every morning in either lemon water or lime water, I will add in at least typically three of our powders. Definitely Vibrant Biome 28, partly because my constitution really needs those extra prebiotics and L-glutamine. So that one has obviously a lower percentage of probiotics, but a higher percentage of the prebiotics. Um, so definitely that one, and then either Radiant Recovery or Hormone Happiness or Super Greens, one of those three. And then the third is always Superfruit C. So the two that are every morning are Superfruit C and VB28, Vibrant Biome 28. And then the third one, I like to rotate around Hormone Happiness, Radiant Recovery, or Super Greens, depending. So, for instance, I happen to be a greens fanatic. I eat so many fresh greens and cooked greens that I can, like skip super greens several days a week and focus more on those two that have more roots and medicinal mushrooms, meaning Hormone Happiness and Radiant Recovery, are both nutritively, like really good for my constitution, but also they're just energy on a subtle energy level. They are very grounding. Most of the ingredients are coming from under the earth, down in the earth. So that's my shot, as you call it. And if I'm out of lemon or lime, I'll use just, bottled, unsweetened lemon or lime juice or tart cherry juice, especially if it's
Mm.
unsweetened tart cherry juice. And if I happen to have, had like tart unsweetened cranberry juice could also be the substitute. But here's the last ingredient in there that's counterintuitive, and that is liquid magnesium. I like there's a couple of brands that sell, just in a 4 ounce, bottle with a dropper. And put a couple of droppers of liquid magnesium in every morning. So starting my day hydrating with, all those really good superfoods and, the water. So that's
Mhm.
the shot. Well, back over to you. Like, I know you have a somewhat similar thing, but different.
Yeah. Oh,
And
well,
then later we can go back to the green, you know, like smoothie slash, sometimes it's a green like soup. That's really a
mhm.
hearty thing, but that's a very different component. So,
Well, my favorite way to deal with systemic inflammation that is on the rise is first I'll try and fast. A minimum of, for me, I tend to fast longer. So I'll look for between 12 and 17 hours before I have anything other than water. And then
mm-hmm.
once I break that fast, I'll move into having a blend of celery, cilantro, and or parsley, ginger, a whole lime with the rind, and then I add in super greens and superfruit C every single time. And then I also, like you, I trade out the adaptogen blend. I tend to oscillate between Radiant Recovery and Adrenal Assist, and I just do that intuitively. One of my favorite ways to do that is just open up the jar and smell them, and whichever one smells better is the one that I go with. So I figure my body is probably telling me the right direction with that. So I'll blend up, I'll make a couple of those quart jars of that, and I'll drink that for as long as my hunger can sustain it. And then after that, I'll move into a single meal for the day. And that tends to be my best way to reset. I'll do that 1 or 2 days in a row, and generally I feel 80% of any systemic inflammation that was bugging me vanish.
Wow, that is really inspiring. That is such a good example, especially you're my example for intermittent fasting. Um, I try to do a minimum of 12 hours, meaning like, don't eat any later than 6. Bronwyn tends to eat at 4. Sometimes I'll end up eating at 5:30 or 6, but I love it when I eat at 4. And then, no breakfast until uh, let's say 9 a.m. or something. But every once in a while, you know, it doesn't work that way, and I don't want to be fanatically attached to that and create like a problem and stress because I'm like, oh, I didn't do my exact schedule, because that's counterproductive. And however, I am inspired by the way you do the long intermittent fasting. It's so wise. It's
Thank you. It
great
really works
Blissipline.
for my. Yeah. What about so as you move from the morning shot, and then you were talking about a green soup or
Yeah.
a green drink.
Well, so actually inserted, maybe an hour after that little small shot hydration drink that we talked about, which I just shake it up in a small jar. I don't bother with the blender. I want it to be super quick and easy. This is first thing in the morning. So it takes me about a minute and a half to do what I said. It's just that stuff is all in a collection on the counter in one place. Really easy to do those things. Then maybe an hour later, we'll make a little French press of Sarvaa Organics conscious coffee, conscious cacao combined together. So that's kind of a fun, hot beverage that we'll do,
Mm-hmm.
and that helps kind of get us like to stall us, because that's got a little definitely a whole different kind of nutrient profile. Plus it's just emotionally satisfying. A hot beverage, we'll put in coconut milk, and we'll make it creamy and kind of yummy, right? No sweeteners at all, but just because there's just a little bit of sweetness to those two Sarva coffee replacements. So that can come next. But then after that, we might have a cooked breakfast of some kind, like veggies cooked together. Maybe we make an Ayurvedic style khichdi or dal, soup with local veggies. But to the green soup thing that we love to do is always going to be, the dark green celery, preferably the local celery, that's like really intense compared to some of the
Mm-hmm.
store-bought stuff that's like what we call blonde celery. We like the really deep green celery that's like medicinal, with some either parsley or cilantro or both. And then, so those for sure. And then those are kind of our foundations. And then optionally, whatever's in the garden, whether it's, we like to grow both Italian basil and a couple kinds of tropical basils. So a Thai basil or a African basil or a India basil, like Tulsi basil. Uh, we may put one of those or two of those in, or a lemon basil. Yeah, it's like we got 3 medicinal basils usually going.
Basil options.
We're kind of a medicinal basil like nuts, but then like exotic, like things that practically grow wild here, like katuk or moringa, which is one of the huge ingredients in a number of our powders like super greens, etc. Um, but yeah, we like to put in some fresh greens, whatever, to add to those. And it depends on time. Sometimes it's just a quick bit of celery, parsley, cilantro, because boom, time is tight. But to make it like a soup and a meal, we'll add right at the beginning some chia seeds and spin that and get those pre-softening a little bit. And then we start, like pull the blender off and start putting in those greens and reblend, some of the woodier greens. Sometimes we'll put in some carrot, but definitely then after the chia has had a little time to soften up by being blended, pre-blended a little bit. At the very end, after we vigorously blended those things that are fibrous, like the celery, parsley, etc., then at the very end, we'll add in avocado if we have it to make it, like really hearty. So the combination of the chia for the proteins, the fats, the fiber, great, great ingredient to add to a green soup. This isn't the like thin kind of more like hydration green drink that you talked about. This is almost like it's so thick in a glass that at the end we're like spooning the last 2 bites out, or sometimes we'll pour it in a bowl and eat it with a spoon. So that's a really great, and we've got a recipe, I think, on the website for one version of the green. I don't know if it's if it's a green drink or the green soup thing, but check out our recipe page and see what inspiration is there. We also have a recipe on there for a golden bliss pudding, and maybe even a golden bliss smoothie. So remember, some kind of turmeric, ginger, and the anti-inflammatory spices are such a good tool. We haven't really talked about our our, our product, Golden Bliss, that is entirely target. I developed it for myself when I've been dealing with excess inflammation, and I use it all the time. But I like to make a pudding, so it's super convenient. I've always got it in the fridge. A lot of healthy fats that Golden Bliss is embedded in. So look for that recipe too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we have covered a lot of things in regards to the topic of inflammation. We started with what is inflammation and is it good, is it bad? And in general, we want inflammation. Inflammation is one of our body's best and most ancient tools for healing. And it's closely related to the immune system. And so you have your innate responses like a cut, and then you have your adaptive responses like a pathogen entering the system. However, when we have chronic inflammation, this is what can lead to a lot of imbalances long term in our system. And that tends to be closely related to triggering our immune system through a variety of things too regularly, and it creates a chronic situation. And so we can learn to adapt those, our lifestyle and our diet and our mentality and our movement practices to reinvigorate a system that is lowering the chronic inflammation. And there's a variety of ways to do that, and we can do it through diet and meditation, changing our life in big ways or in little ways. But the best way is to just dial in a daily routine with some Blissipline, to where you are working into a schedule that just keeps boosting your vitality and lowering your gut inflammation, helping heal up any gut permeability that you might be having, and lead you in the direction of lowering chronic inflammation long term. And this will help with genetic expression, epigenetic expression. This will help with just inspiration in general. So, learning your symptoms, diving into what your habits are and which ones are serving you and which ones aren't, and surrounding yourself with as much good in energy and information as you can, so that you're working with inflammation as a language and a teacher, and not something that is just chronically tearing us apart cell by cell.
Wow. Thank you for that wrap up and that review. You have a gift for being concise. Uh, I really admire that. Thank you. That is so awesome. Uh, and
You,
really just want to send everybody watching this, if you stuck with it this far, bless you, thank you. And wow, just really, really want to just send you blessings for your journey of health and vibrancy and this particular aspect of it, where you can just find every little fun upgrade that's possible in your life. It's so worth it. It just, yeah, life is so great when we get some of these things dialed in.
awesome. Well, thank you, Ahta.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
listeners, and
Joshy.
we will be diving into inflammation even more deeply in the time to come. So, thanks for listening.